On Combine Radio Row, joined now by head coach DeMeco Ryans. Coach, great to see you.
Hey, great to see you guys. Been a while.
Yeah, here we are in Indianapolis. And what is the main thing you get out of this visit to the Combine?
The main thing I get out of this visit is being able to sit with you guys.
Awesome.
The main thing is when going through the interview process, we get about 20 minutes, with some prospects. So being able to sit in a room and just sit across from a guy and just get to hear their background, like their upbringing, like their history of football, how they got started, and hear their why. So you get to hear a guy's story. You get to feel a guy's energy, feel his passion, his love for the game of football. That's what really jumps out to me in those 20-minute interviews. Sometimes they go pretty fast and you can't get some questions in because some guys are very talkative and some guys you have to kind of push them a little bit more and prod them you have to ask them a few more questions, or you instantly get a feel for personalities.
Coach, how much do you want to know about them before they walk in the room, or do you want it to be completely organic, you meeting this guy, hey, don't tell me anything, I want to be able to get that from him one-on-one or the room to him?
Yeah, I would love it to be more organic, but our scouts, they do such a thorough job, like with the background, so you kind of already know a little bit of the information. And I think our guys done a great job this year, Lipford and his staff, of just honing in on making those interviews more targeted and trying to see, like, what do we actually need to know more about this player so we can spend more time on the unknown or the things we need to dig deeper on, as opposed to some of the background and stuff that we already know. Our scouts, they do such an excellent job. I mean, they've been watching these guys for some of them 3 years, some of them 4 years, and they follow these guys, so they pretty much know who they are. Now it's just a matter of coaches getting the first look, to get to know the guys.
Well, what about the workouts themselves? Because a lot of people call it the underwear Olympics or whatever because they're not in football gear, but you do see some things. What do you get out of that part of it?
Yeah, when it comes to the workouts, per se, I know a lot of emphasis is put on the 40-yard dash. For me, you can kind of tell how fast guys are watching the tape, but it's good to see, this guy, he was, sub 4.6 or 4, but that's not where we're hanging our hat on drafting a guy when it comes to the 40-yard dash. For me, I put a little bit more onus on the position drills, right, and seeing guys, how they move, how athletic they are, what's their fluidity like as they're going through their drops and those certain things. So that stands out a little bit more to myself.
One of the things I think I've asked you about this before, but at the Combine, can you tell how swarmy a guy is? And you know what I mean by that, because that's your thing. And I think I say that to Mark all the time. Like, when I look at a player, no matter where they are, I go, is that guy swarmy? I think that way now. Do you have kind of get a feel for that here? Or is it something you get in a 30 visit? Yeah. How do you get a feel for how swarmy a guy can be?
That's interesting you said that. I know in our interviews last night, I left at the end after our last interview, I was like, man, we definitely have a couple swarm candidates. And you can feel like that energy from guys, like how they step into the room, like how confident guys are. Hearing guys talk about how they practice and how they view practice, how important it is to them, like that lets me know, or why do you love football? Well, I love to compete. I don't care when it is, practice again. I love to compete. Those are all those swarm components that we're looking for in our players.
You talked about knowing a guy's why, or trying to find out, and how important is that? They want to be good, not just at football, but at all aspects of life, and it's got to be difficult to tell with some guys.
Yeah, it is difficult to tell, and that why speaks to me a little bit more, because you can hear a guy, whether he's doing it for his family, or whether he wants to do it because he wants to be truly great at football. I don't think a lot of guys are chasing money anymore with the NIL deals. These guys have a little change in their pockets now. So, but for me, and I can always draw back to that, because what's going to drive you, right, when you have the contract, when you get drafted in the first round, that's behind you now. What's going to drive you? What's going to sustain you through a season where we hit a little adversity? Like, what's the reason behind why you're doing what you do? Because you all know we play a tough sport, and there are going to be a lot of tough moments. So what are you going to lean on to push you through when you hit those difficult patches? And that's where the reason of what's your why and what's pushing you. And if I have to, I can always go back and remind a guy of his why and remind him of why he's doing what he's doing. That serves as a motivation tactic for me later whenever I need it.
Coach, we have missed you. and not been able to talk to you on radio, so we have not had a chance to talk to you. You mentioned coaches. We have not had a chance to talk to you about Nick Haley and what he brings as offensive coordinator. What can you kind of share with us about why Nick Haley was the right fit for Houston, why he was the right fit for the Texans, and for you as the head coach?
Yeah, it starts with Nick's passion for the game. I think instantly when you talk to him, you feel his passion for the game of football, his love for football. What set him apart for me was just, again, his diverse background. Like when Nick started in coaching, he coached on the defensive side of the ball for a long time. Then when he got to New England, he worked with the offensive line. He worked with the running backs. He worked with tight ends. So he's worked with a ton of different guys in different capacities. Right? He's led a lot of different guys, different personalities, and he's led those guys to have successful seasons. And add that onto him getting with the Rams and Sean McVay, and you see how high-powered that offense for the Rams has been, and guys that have left from the Rams, they've been very successful at their other stops in the NFL, and just what he was able to learn from Sean. Sean is a great leader, great motivator, and sometimes talking to Kayla, I feel like I'm talking to Sean. To Sean at times. But, you know, what I talk to him about and emphasize most important to me is the adaptability, right? Him having the different background, being at different places, multiple stops. Like, okay, what are we doing?
Right.
And how are we doing? Well, it's all tailored around CJ. And what does CJ do well? And how do we morph the offense to fit what he does well and our players around him, just putting those guys in position to be successful, move the football, score points.
Coach, the Combine's all about the draft, but we have free agency before the draft. And I know you have about 25 free agents or so. How hard is it to make these decisions? I know some guys – it's tough to get them back because of the market or whatever the case is. How does that process go for you when you're evaluating who to make offers to with Nick and go through that whole situation?
Yeah, now coming into this offseason, we have over 20 impending free agents. So we always start with our guys. And myself and Nick, we want to make it an emphasis to our guys. In our last team meeting, I told our guys, everybody understands you're a free agent. Everybody has, oh, man, what's going to happen to me next? So we let our guys know, hey, you're going to hear from us. You're going to hear from us. Your representatives will hear from us because we know our guys who are free agents, right? You know what they bring to the table. You know their work habits. So I always start there. And we're going through right now our self-scout process and watching the tape. And as you go back through the season and watch it again with fresh eyes, you start to like, hey, we definitely need to make sure we keep this player. We need to make sure we're getting him back. He was very beneficial to us. And there's a lot of tough conversations that are going on with the free agents because, man, you want everyone back, right? Yeah. We had a successful run last year, went deep into the playoffs. So many, all those guys who are free agents, they contributed to us being in the position we were in at the end of the year. So you evaluate your guys, see who you want to add back, whatever the contracts are, let Nick handle that. Stay out of the way of the contracts. And then you look at, okay, who's available on other teams. And it's our job always to improve our roster. So you look at certain positions and you see, okay, well, X player is available. Does he fit? Does anyone have a background or history with this player, know anything about him? As opposed, because I can watch the tape and love everyone, but what type of player is he when he gets into our building? Right. So it's tough in the free agency world because you don't get a chance to have this scouting combine or 30 visits and meet with guys before you sign them. It's like, okay, what's the contract?
Right.
And how much are we signing for? That takes precedence over everything else.
Is that why it kind of helps to meet people here? Because a few years down the line, you might see them as free agents, right?
No doubt. And that's why even though you don't – I mean, we have 6 draft picks this year. You don't get to select everyone, but you get to interview a lot of guys. You get to know who they are. And a lot of times we're talking about players, and Nick, he has a computer brain. He can pull it up instantly like, hey, I remember when this guy was coming out, this. And Nick has – great encyclopedia of history of different guys he's scouted or who's been in other places before. So it's great having Nick to work with because he's just talked to so many different players and he knows, a lot of guys. So it helps when he comes to free agency. It's like, hey, I remember this guy was this type of player coming out and he's improved. He's in this spot now. I think he would be a great addition.
You have 6 as of right now. Let's be honest. With Nick, it could turn into 8. It could turn into 4. A lot of different ways you go. Coach, I met you for the first time 2 years ago at this event, and that was the first time you were going through. You were building staff. You were building, the scouts were getting to know the coaches, and you were going through all of that, and you were going through the building the team process at that point. And then last year, your second year. This is another third year that you're going through the team building process for 2025. Are there things that you've kind of added to the process as you've gone through it, as you've gotten accustomed to doing this now the third time? Are there things that you're doing maybe a little bit differently than you did them the first year because now you're, I don't use the word comfortable. Nobody's ever comfortable in this league. But you're comfortable with the process, that you want to add some things to it that maybe you know from other teams or whatever. How do you kind of look at this third year of building the team with Nick and with your scouts and coaches?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when you look at building a team, it goes to, when I first started out, we had scouts and we had probably different schemes and guys were looking for different things. Right. There may have been things that were more important to other staffs that weren't so important to me. So I just love how, Nick and Lipford and the staff, the scouting staff, it's kind of, I see the language shifting in how we're talking about players.
Right.
Wow.
Right. I see like that common language amongst how we coach our players, what we're asking them to do. I start to see that show up in their reports and how they talk about player, or, hey, this is a swarm player, or this isn't a DeMeco guy, or this, and you start to see that, and it's like, oh man, they understand like what we're looking for. So it's so much easier now to know the type of players we want and know who to, hey, we probably need to stay away from this guy at this point in time. He's not the guy for us. So just seeing that come together so quickly, that's been the cool part about the team building. It's just such a more smooth transition, I would say, this year. Just in the interviews and everything, like it's just this guy's done an unbelievable job of just picking up the speed on how I talk, how I communicate to guys and guys I'm looking for.
All right, so what event do you like better, this or the NFL annual meeting, which is very different, right? This is everybody in the league as far as assistant coaches and front office people and all of that, and you run into people in the halls. It's like a who's who. It's a convention. It's a reunion of sorts. What do you think?
Yeah, this is more cool for that reason. I can run into a lot of, some of my former coworkers, guys I worked with in the past at different spots, old teammates I've seen. So it's cool because you're going to run into somebody you haven't seen in a long time, and it's going to be that reunion. The annual meeting is a little more, like, I
formal.
Guess, very more formal. You're not running into anybody.
Black tie versus quarter zip.
I like the quarter zip.
That's good. Coach, we haven't talked yet about CJ.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, we don't even when I met, we didn't even know CJ was a bright light in our eye, and he becomes that face of the franchise going forward. He's now going into year 3. I know the expectations are always high for him, but what are your expectations for CJ as he goes into year 3?
It starts with the expectations CJ has for himself, right? And those are very high. Like CJ, he understands and knows that he can be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So you start there, and a guy who has that mindset, it's easy to coach a guy like that because he's so hard on himself, right? And so he has high expectations. I always have high expectations going in each and every year because I don't see it any other way. We put so much work, so much time and effort into what we do, whereas why don't you have high expectations? And so, it's our job to make sure we continue to add guys to our team, add great players who can help us and help CJ. I think the more we can put great players around CJ and help him, the more we'll see him, take off with all the talents that he has, right?
Coach, I know you're still planning a lot. Just a couple more here. I know you're still planning a lot of things for the offseason and the preseason. Last year you had the Hall of Fame game and a long preseason, all that camp. This year, more of a normal, I'll put that in air quotes, camp. Or is it, what are you thinking here as far as where we sit right now, as far as your summer plans? Because I know you like these joint practices if you can put some together.
Yeah, for sure. We're still working through getting a joint practice. There could be potential of going to Detroit and having some joint practices there. So a lot of things are, talking to the head coach. That's why it's good to be here and talk with head coach to see who is up for the joint practice. And I like to do the joint practices in the second or third, before the second or third preseason game, not so much the first one. I want to just, I think guys aren't ready by that first preseason game to do joint practices. So we'll be on our own in Houston. Hopefully we may move around a little bit. It's still a lot of discussion. Sometimes as for me, John, where I'm trying to run from the heat as much as I can. That's because I know how taxing it is on our players. Right? We're probably one of the only teams who are working in the conditions that we work in training camp with the humidity. And it's tough working in that heat in Houston, and we understand that. So trying to, minimize our time in the humidity, we'll look at that as well, see if we can go away for camp like we did for the Hall of Fame game. I think going away to Cleveland was very beneficial, and we talked about that throughout the season of how we had that camaraderie and that bond. It kind of brought our guys closer together. So leaning on that past experience from last year kind of makes me want to find a way to make that happen again.
We needed a jacket one of those days.
Yeah,
that was
we
kind
did.
of nice.
Yes, that was a fantastic day.
All right, so when you're in touch with the family, okay, this is our M&G Bank Ask Coach question of the week. Do you FaceTime? How do you stay in touch? Because I know it's important to you.
Yes.
When you're away at these events, you want to connect. How do you do it?
For sure. It starts with a FaceTime. FaceTime in the morning. I try not to mess with them while I know they're getting ready for school because DeMeco,
chaotic.
She's not answering my call. So, I know to try to call around 7:25 when they're in the car on the way to school.
What is that like for you, though, in the off season? You're around for those moments getting ready for school, which I don't care how well organized your family is. Those can be very tough moments.
Oh, those are always hectic. Depends on how the kids wake up and who's excited and ready to go, or who's like, I did not get enough sleep last night, Dad. And
you find out very quickly.
I want to go to school. So for the most part, they've been doing a great job of getting up and getting ready. But there's always those moments. And in the off season, I can take them to school. And it's nothing like driving to school and just hearing, what's on their mind and having those conversations. Hey, what song do you want to listen to? It's just I really love those moments. Picking them up from school, taking them to school, enjoy every time I can get. I want to do that.
And they will always ask you a question that comes from out of nowhere. You have where did you come up with that?
Oh yeah,
I got a few of those.
That's fun. Coach, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you guys, man. Enjoyed it.